Okay, we are live on Facebook. Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Escobar, and this is Shannon Funk. We're doing a live, like in-person interview today, which is always fun, which is even cooler because she lives in New Zealand most of the time, but she happens to be in St. George for a couple months. So it was fun that we got to see each other a couple weekends ago at that event, right. And then now we're going to talk a little bit about your journey since leaving the church, because you've been out about the same time as us, and it's kind of cool how we have a connection. In the neighborhood. Her sister was in my ward, and she also at about the exact same time as me and her was deciding to leave the church. So it was really cool for me to have other people in my own ward be having their faith transition journey at the exact same time. And we also have two other families in this cul-de-sac that I live in at the exact same time. So it was like your sister and then two other families in my little cul-de-sac, and all in the same ward. So it was really cool. We got to get together a few times and talk about our struggles and have that support. And be able to relate and to not feel so alone, because you were saying how it can feel very lonely,
super isolating. Well, especially because I went through that faith transition in New Zealand where there aren't a lot of members anyways, and I was somewhat new there. So but it's nice to have support. I'm gonna make sure we get a little closer so that we get good audio. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, so we've been out about the same time, and you tell me a little bit about that beginning stage, and then we'll just go into your journey since leaving Mormonism, because the purpose of these calls are to talk about the things that you've overcome, some things that you wish you would have known. It's almost like if you could talk to your 4 years ago version of yourself, what would you tell yourself? Because we are wanting to speak to people who are more freshly out, and let's share some things that we've could have done differently, or hoping that even just words of encouragement for people who don't know they're in the thick of it right now, and they just need some encouraging words from people who've been out a little longer, like it's okay, you're gonna be okay. I think I'll start with the words of encouragement, actually, because I know when I was first coming out of the church or losing my faith or having a faith transition, that was what I felt I needed the most, was some encouragement. And I think to that, I would just say it gets better. Just like, and also I'm going to talk just briefly about my divorce because of the context. Same with divorce, like whenever there's some really hard life shift, it takes time, and sometimes you just have to sit with that pain and accept that. I really liked what Margie Delin has talked about a few times, and it's been in reference to how she dealt with her dad's passing, and meditation. She talks about doing meditation and just sitting with her grief, and accepting like, this is really hard and sad, and all the feelings. Just let yourself feel those things. It's okay to feel those things, but it's also good to have hope for the future, because I know in my experience, and you guys' experience, that at least from what I know of you, like there has been a great bright future ahead of what the faith transition was. So so that's my words of encouragement. Hang in there, it gets better, and there's a beautiful life on the other side of it. And that is what I would go back and tell myself back then, because it was scary, and I remember those feelings very well. I think in terms of like just giving a little bit of background for what was going on for me, sort of leading up to my faith transition, is that I was also going through a divorce and moving countries. So, and we don't need to make it about that, but I just, for the context of this, I think it is important for me to mention those things, because sometimes it takes like this major life shift to have everything fall apart, to like sort of rebuild your ego and your identity. And, Eckhart Tolle talks about that a little bit in his book, or a lot actually. It's basically what it's about. But like how when sometimes people have something tragic happen in their life, like their house burns down or something that really or they lose a job, it pulls at their identity of who they are. And they have to sort of rebuild that. He said a lot of times along with that is an accompanying sense of freedom. And so I think when I moved countries and went through this divorce after a 20-year marriage, even though it was terrifying, I also felt this newfound sense of freedom and just that, like, I need to kind of rethink things in my life. And it didn't come consciously at first that I was going to rethink the church, but I think it at least opened the door to like examining, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of just the background of how, like, what was going on in my life at the time.
Which I think is important to mention because, you know, people who are listening could probably identify with your unique experience, you know, going through a divorce and a faith transition at the same time.
Yeah.
It's very relevant information for those who are watching who might be experiencing the exact same thing. And it feels like so much.
Everything at once.
All at once. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, at least in my experience, like that's kind of how it had to be. Like just everything kind of had to collapse for me to rebuild a different life. So it was about 6 months after my divorce that I guess in terms of just the practicalities of things, my kids were with my ex on the weekends. So all of a sudden I wasn't in a place where it was like, I have to go to church, I have to get kids ready. Like it wasn't part of the routine anymore. You know, I'd wake up on Sunday and be like, like I actually have a choice.
Yeah.
And I hadn't ever in my life had that. Not when I was a kid, not when I was married, not, you know, that it wasn't ever part of the equation.
Yeah.
So that's a piece of it. And I would say maybe to people, not, you know, they're not in that situation. Like sometimes you just have to give yourself that, like, and step back and say like, do I need a break? You know, like maybe you're still in the church, but if you're feeling these feelings, like sometimes you just have to physically step away for a little bit. Maybe it's not forever, but maybe it is. But so that was part of it. And then just allowing myself to read anti-Mormon, you know, I hate the term anti-Mormon, right?
I know.
But my brother I had asked him, and it wasn't something that he came out and told me even. It was, I had to ask him, why did you leave the church? Because he left about a year before me. And he mentioned the CES letter. And I remember about a year before or around that time, like kind of opening up the document, reading the first page and being like, nope, that's the devil, you know, I can't. Yeah. So then fast forward back to this time I was just talking about, when I all of a sudden didn't have the kids on the weekends. And I was like, you know what, maybe I do need to open that back up again. Yeah. And it wasn't just actually opening the document, but it was opening my mind to the fact that I need to read this with an open mind and say, what if I was wrong? And I would say within 20 minutes. Really? I mean, it was quick. Like I started reading about whether it was anachronisms or the newer version of the Bible that had been translated, or, you know, just things that you can't, or the Book of Abraham or the Kinderhook plates. I started just fast forward reading through all of this stuff and then digging in like the rabbit hole that you go through when you start clicking all these links and it just fell apart for me. And I just had, I would say it was two things. It was a sinking feeling and a freeing feeling, because there were so many things that had always been on my shelf. Mainly, I would say for me, because I'm a woman, it was polygamy. Yes. Because of being a cog in the eternal wheel of polygamy and second class to men just always made me feel sick. Yeah. But so things like that, you know, blacks in the priesthood always bothered me. The LGBT thing bothered me, like, but it was like, I had to hold space for like, yes, these things bother me and dang it, I know it's true. So, you know, like it was just this yuck feeling. Yeah. So I would say when in that 20-minute time, maybe it was longer, it felt like it just a really immediate quick thing. It was those two different feelings of like, crap, everything that I thought I knew is I just can't get behind it anymore. And yes, I don't have to be a cog in the eternal wheel of polygamy. Yeah. And all these things, like there's the simple, like Occam's razor. We have to do all this mental gymnastics to make the church work and to make it true. Yeah. Or someone made it up.
Yeah. And you let it all go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's very good, because I totally can relate, and I think everybody can. It's like,
yeah,
at the same time, you're feeling so excited and free because you no longer have to agree with all the things that you don't agree with, but you feel forced to agree with. But then also there's that other part where you're like, but then what does this mean about everything? You know?
Yeah.
So like, how did you manage that? You know, when it comes to because you feel this euphoria and freedom and excitement, like, oh yes, I'm free.
Yeah.
But then little by little, these things come up and you're like, wait a minute,
death.
What does it mean after we die? Like is there a God? Like, are we receiving inspiration from something?
Yeah.
Like, what is prayer? Like, all these things that come over time that you don't realize initially, but then I think when you do have that like dark night of the soul moment, that's when it's almost like you've surrendered to the possibility that there is nothing. Right. Because that's where I was at. I was like, what if there is nothing? And all this time I've just been telling myself a story to make myself feel better about life, but nothing is real. And so that's where it got really heavy, but I didn't stay there very long, thankfully, because I don't see how staying there can really help us live out the rest of our lives. So I was like, either I just hate life and feel so sad and depressed that there's nothing, or I find some things to cling to that will help me live out the rest of my life and be happy and be there for my kids and hopefully help them see this world and life as a good positive thing instead of bad and scary.
Right. Yeah, totally. So what helped me kind of I guess a couple things.
And did you have that darkness? So I wonder, because Shannon didn't ever have that, where he never really ever once considered that there's nothing to this life. It was just like never. And to me, it was like, if the church is not true, then everything goes.
Yeah. And I think that's a pretty universal experience from people that I've talked to or heard their stories. I mean, I would say it wasn't just one, like a period of time, more so of just like kind of, like a stock market chart or something. But there's times I would dip into that heavily and feel that weight. And I would just say it happens less frequently now to me. And I would say, freedom comes at a cost. And we thought, we had the answers before.
Yeah.
Right. But now I can look back and say, I didn't have the freedom that I have now, but I had the security, but it was a false security. And I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
But there was some comfort in that.
Yeah.
And I think to that now I can say, I have no idea what's going to happen after this life, but I can choose to believe that there is something bigger. Yeah. I mean, not to say I necessarily believe in a white bearded man in the sky that helps us find our car keys and also has, genocide going on over in Ukraine. That doesn't really make sense to me, but I feel like maybe to let myself believe, just like you were saying, what is helpful to me, right? Like if it's not helpful to feel depressed and in that sad space. What is helpful to me now is to think maybe there is something after this life. And I also know, I don't know that.
Yeah.
But I can just sit with like, it's an unknown, but if it makes me feel better, then maybe I'll choose to shape my day-to-day activities and whatnot and hopes that like, yes, that maybe that will be a thing.
Yeah. I think that's the difference that I'm starting to realize now with the way we acted as Mormons, because I still believe that there is room for trusting in something that we don't know or believing in something that we don't understand or know for a fact. But the church teaches that to some degree, but they also teach that we do know. Right. So it's kind of confusing because then that's where I think that it can be like a huge mind game afterwards, because you're like, wait, I don't want anything to do with Mormonism. I don't want my brain to think as a Mormon does. So you almost feel like you have to like stop thinking the way a Mormon does 100%. But now I'm finding myself like being okay with some parts of my Mormon beliefs, because I don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing, you know, like there's certain things that I feel like, yeah, we can still believe in life after death, and I can decide, you know, what I like about life after death.
I think the difference is we're not coming to it now as post-Mormons from a place of we know.
With arrogance.
With arrogance. It's like, oh, that sounds like a nice thing. Like, I hope that's true. But also I don't know.
And I'm not going to ever try to convert anybody to my beliefs, you know?
Right. Or look down on people that,
You know, I was just thinking about the movie The Shack. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's such a good movie. And I saw it as a Mormon, and I've been thinking about it recently and wondering if I still would like it now that I'm out of the church. It's kind of just a story of a man who goes through a tragedy, and he like lost his faith and everything, probably had the dark night of the soul, and then he has this experience where he's meeting like God and different, there's lots to it, but in this movie he's meeting God, and God shows up for him as a Black woman. And I'm just like, I love that concept that God will show up for us in whatever form that resonates the most with us. You know, because he had an abusive father, and so it's like he didn't want
the male figure.
So to me, I like to imagine that that's true, like in life, where whatever our beliefs can be so unique in that way. So why would I ever say God is a man with a white beard when God for me could be something completely different, and I don't ever feel the need now to convert people to my version of God, because it's so individual. So you feel like, I like touching on that, because for me, I remember feeling so overwhelmed and scared that there was no God, you know, but now I'm just open to a different version of God, and whatever feels like fits best with me. But another thing that I feel like was a struggle was parenting, you know, like now how do we teach our kids, because I don't know what's true, and so how do I teach them about life? How do I give them like a positive I don't know how to turn these notifications off, sorry. But it's from my phone going to my computer. So I think I still am, I feel like I'm navigating it well, you know, trying to teach my kids to have an open mind for everything, but also there's a part of me that wants to paint this beautiful picture that I used to have, you know, like the Santa Claus story. Like I felt sad when they had to find out that he wasn't real. And so it's like, there's still part of me that wants to give them this beautiful story and say like,
this is what's going to happen.
It's amazing. And,
I'll always keep you safe. And
and you can always talk to Jesus. I used to always say that. And I, you know, like you can always ask Jesus to, you know, think of Jesus at night when you have bad dreams, you know, like he'll be there to comfort you. And so now I feel like I find myself still wanting to have something to give them.
I think some of that comes from a lot of guilt that we are piled on with as Mormons. You know what I mean? Like as parents, especially as mothers, you know, we're just given this huge, I think Margie touched on this actually on her podcast the other day, or her interview with John Dehlin, was that we just have this, I don't know, sense from the church that if we do everything right, our kids will be protected. You know, if we follow all the rules, if we have our family home evening, if we're shiny, happy people on Sundays, and we just have to come to a point to realize our kids are who they are. I mean, they're humans just like we are, and they're going to be their own people. And yes, we want to try to protect them where we can, and we try to teach them what we can to help them be good people. But in the end, they're going to make their own decisions. And so I think part of it is letting go of that learned Mormon narrative that we have any control over our children's future. And part of it too is just, I guess, as we have to do ourselves too, learning to be okay with the unknown.
That's a good one. Like I think that can be a very powerful thing to pass on to our kids. Like it's okay that we don't know, and it's not as scary. It doesn't have to be scary. But we see it as scary, I think. And
I think another thing that's coming up for me is authenticity. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I'm able to have a more authentic relationship with everyone in my life now that I'm out of the church, because I'm not trying to constantly prop up the church narrative.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so like with my kids, especially my one of my children who has since left the church, like I just feel like there's a much more open relationship that we can have, that's because it's like outside of the church doctrine, you know. It's and not that we're necessarily bashing on the church or anything when we get together, but I mean, if there was a concern or something where she's like, yeah, I feel like LGBTQ, like it's really handled badly in the church, and you know, we can have that conversation openly. And
as opposed to, I do like to think back on how would I responded to that as a Mormon. And you know, you're right, like you would have responded to that as a Mormon, you would have responded to that like, well, you know, some things we just don't understand and God has his reasons.
Right.
You know.
So I think we also have to see like the harm that we were inflicting on our children as being in the church as Mormons, and because we were propping up this narrative, and there was unseen harm, you know, seen or unseen. But so I think just counting our blessings, you know, I know. It's still in my head, I can't, but like there's so many good things that we can still give them outside of the church. And we don't have to necessarily, because I think that the conditioning ran so deep that to feel like if you're not giving them what you gave them as more, you know, you were told to give them as Mormons, that it's all going to go to pot.
Like they're going to end up being sad and depressed and homeless, you know.
Right. Yeah, but there's still plenty of, I mean, and I think just spending time with them, you know, like you have a second Saturday, and I know you guys do tons of fun activities on follow you on social media, and just having that extra time with your kids and not having to pressure them into, oh, your hair isn't combed for church, where's your tie, where's your matching socks, you know? It's so good to be free of that.
It is.
And so just being able to be more authentic, spending time, quality time.
I liked how you said the authenticity part of it, because that is something that I'm recognizing. Like my daughter and I would go on regular runs and hikes together, just her and I. My oldest, she's 16, and it's like I keep saying how crazy it is that I'm like telling her all these things about myself at her age that I would have never told her. Like I would have pretended that I never did any of these things, but I'm like, gosh, it's so cool that I can tell you everything that I ever did as a teenager. And I don't have to pretend that I was perfect, because I'm trying to be this example for you.
Right, exactly.
And now I don't see the things that I did as a teenager as bad. I just was like, that's my life experience. I made mistakes, but not in a mistake that in a way that just taught me something more of what I really wanted in my life. Not, oh, you should really hate yourself now. You should really like spend the rest of your life repenting for that. And trying to live up to, like trying to make up for it. Like I felt like I was trying to make up for the bad that I did as a teenager. And I would forever be in debt to God because of my choices. But now I'm like, I made some choices that affected me and other people negatively, but I don't really have any regrets because I learned something from it. So it's not like I'm like, well, I don't care that I hurt people and I don't care that I did that. It's like, and that's the thing that I didn't understand as a Mormon. I thought like, if you don't feel awful about yourself and like so much shame that you would do it again. I'm like, no, there's more to it. That it's hard to put into words sometimes for me to explain the difference between the shame that I had and then around the bad things that I did, or hurtful things. I don't even want to call it bad, because I just want, like my values now are just like, I don't want to hurt other people. I don't want to hurt myself, you know. And so if I did hurt other people, of course I felt bad for it and I would want to make it right, but it's different now, going back and being like the heavy shame that I had, as opposed to just feeling sorry and bad and like, I'm going to try to make it right and then move on. And like, it's much easier to let go of those things now than it was when I was in the church, because I felt like I had to constantly hate myself, because that would make me better for God, you know?
And I think there's a huge I don't know, emotional trauma or whatever that we do to ourselves and our children when we're teaching them that there's this all-powerful being in the sky that's like looking down on them with anger
Yeah.
when they step out of this box.
Yeah.
And so that's a totally different type of regret or shame than it is to just look back and say, oh, that probably wasn't the best way to act.
Yeah.
How could I have done that better?
Yeah.
And that's something we can learn and grow from, but not carry the heavy shame that comes with feeling that God hates you.
Yeah.
Or
and
is
how could
disappointed
if
in
you
you
would have been more converted, you wouldn't have ever done that in the first place, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But so now tell me a little bit about how it's been and how you've navigated your relationships with family members or friends that are true believing Mormons now.
It varies. Like I would say I have probably maybe not half and half, maybe like 3/4 of the people in my life that were that are members. It has been relatively easy in the sense of that we don't talk about it a ton, but they've been pretty accepting. I would say there's been a couple of friendships that have just sort of disappeared, or one friend that has actually completely cut me out of her life for the reason of that I left the church.
Yeah.
And so I think to that, I would just say to anyone struggling with those, and it's painful, it's hard, because on the one hand, you've made this extremely difficult, you've come to this extremely difficult conclusion. And then to get shut down by people when you try to go and talk about it, like, hey, I found this out, this is really upsetting to me. And then they don't want to talk to you anymore. Like that's a double whammy. It's and anyone that's been through this knows like how difficult that is and how painful that is. It's just, and I would, I guess, sort of on a side note, I would not recommend taking your pain to other people that are still in the church, because it doesn't,
I know,
it doesn't ever end well.
You think that they would understand to some degree, but they don't. They absolutely don't understand.
No, because you're dangerous now to them.
Yeah. Or they try to give you, they actually trigger you because they'll give you the Mormon responses. And you're like, how do you not know what I just told you?
Yeah.
Like I had a woman, such a nice woman, and she was the only one that actually asked me, hey, let's get together. I'd love to, you know, talk, like what happened, you know? I was just like so grateful that she gave me the opportunity to tell her what I was going through, and she really listened. But then she quoted Joseph Smith, and I was like, I was so like angry, but I was like, oh, I can't be angry. Like she doesn't know that what I think of Joseph Smith now. I've tried to be real light about my experience because I didn't want to
call him a pedophile. And
and I didn't want to be like disrespectful to her beliefs, but I was also trying to be authentic about what I was going through. And I was grateful that she gave me the chance to explain it. But I was like, you did not just quote Joseph Smith to me.
It's something that I guess most of us just have to learn as we go through that process. But I don't know that I if I would have maybe listened to a few more podcasts or talked to a few more people that have been in my shoes or your shoes, to say like, it just doesn't end well when you try to take your CES letter stuff to you know, you do. People. You
really do believe that if only I
could just show you all this,
they'll be in the same, like they'll understand me, but they don't.
But then think back to when you were a Mormon, you thought if someone could just hear these conference talks, just this, you know, they would read this Book of Mormon, you'd get it, and you'd get on board and pay 10% of your income.
It's so true. I had my former one of my mission companions, she was also very sweet and was like, oh, like, tell me more, what's going on? And I was like, thank you. You should read the CES letter. And I sent it to her, and she did. She read, she skimmed, she said she started reading it. She's like, whoa, that's really long. And so she did make an attempt to like understand where I was coming from, but she had all kinds of excuses for it. Like, and so I was like, it just doesn't work unless they're ready and they're really open for that. And so,
I mean, that was my experience. My brother told me about it. I read the first page and I was like, nope, a year later. So I get it.
They're not always going to take it the way you did, you know? And they might, it's like, it's just the whole cognitive dissonance that I didn't really understand was at play in my entire life. And, you know, so now having that perspective, I'm like, oh, and then, you know, it really even goes into the law of attraction, like you create your own reality. So once you realize that you are literally choosing what you want to believe, and there is I mean, it's hard to say this because I'm not 100% sure, but there is no actual truth. There's just your own truth.
Sure.
And I thought when I left that I would find the truth, something that everybody would collectively agree on. That's the truth. If we can all agree on it, then that's how we know it's true.
In terms of like religious beliefs or
anything about life, like, just any, if everybody agrees on it, that means it's true. And so that's what I thought truth was. But now I realize that's impossible. You're never gonna find that.
I don't think I ever had that thought, especially once, I mean, like a lot of people leaving the Mormon church, once Mormonism collapses for you, kind of all like, I don't think many of us go looking for a new, I mean, I know that's not what you're looking for, a new religion, but in terms of beliefs, I think
I wanted to find what God was mostly, like, well, what is God then? And I want to know absolutely what is true about God.
Right.
If it's just an energy, if it's just, I kind of wanted there to be some evidence, because I thought I had evidence in the church. Like, little did I know it was not, it's just a story. So, I think I just thought that there was actual legit evidence that there was a God, and I wanted to find out what it was.
Yeah. I think, just sort of along those lines is when you kind of deconstruct, like, how did we know? Well, we knew because we knew, like, we knew because we felt it. All right. And then you start looking at, I don't know, suicide bombers, any other religion really. But I mean, I just use them as an example because they go to the extent of killing themselves for what they believe in. Yeah. They're going to meet Allah and get 99 virgins because of what they're doing. Yeah. They know more than anyone else knows, but I only say that because they're going to the extent of the ultimate, Yeah. And so when you're basing your belief system off of your feelings, you just start looking around at a lot of catastrophes that's led to. Obviously not a reliable place to get any information. So true. I'm so looking at emotions differently now, and that was a hard thing for me to understand. Yeah, because we are taught our entire lives, go off how you feel, know, but then you're like, now looking back, I did a lot of things based on my emotions and it didn't turn out so well. Yeah, so I don't think we should go off how we feel. Like, it goes much deeper than that. Like, there's a part of me or us, I think, as individuals, that we, mostly Mormons or people who have been raised in a religion similar, have not really tapped into that intuition that the church talks about as the Holy Ghost, but I never really had that. Like, it was more my emotions, that I was going off my emotions, which there's a deeper layer to it that I'm just now discovering. Yeah, I think to that too, like, the church, yes, they talk about feelings, but they also talk about them within a context of what the church teaches is okay to feel. Yeah, like, you can't be mad, you can't be angry, you can't be jealous, you can't be envious. Like, so I think there is an element of trusting our feelings, but in terms of intuition and tapping into what that is. But that also is in part what helped lead me out of the church, was finally tapping into my own intuition. Yeah, that this doesn't feel right. When I say the church taught us to feel, like, to trust our feelings, they were actually telling us what our feelings were. The church is true. That Joseph Smith was a prophet, and so, like, and as I don't remember which prophets said it, but get up and bear your testimony. Your testimony has gotten in the bearing of it, and just like when you say something over and over and over, so you'll convince yourself. Yeah. I guess they taught us to not trust our own feelings in a way too, because they taught us that our feelings were what they gave us. Yeah. If we're okay. They guided us. Because if you come to a church leader and say, I'm feeling like I don't believe this anymore, then you're invalidated. Yeah. That can't be right. Yeah. And then to understand, when we do pray, to find out if the church is true, because all of us have. So that was one thing. Yeah, that was one thing that was really confusing for me. I'm like, but wait, what does that mean then? If I can't trust my feelings? But what I didn't realize is that I had already made the decision beforehand. Right. And so of course I was going to, like the church apologists, we're going to approach this study in from the standpoint, we already know the church is true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Where's that going to get you? There's no other option really. When I was praying, I wasn't open at all to the fact that it could
not be true.
Right.
I was like, okay, this is the next step for me. I got to go on a mission.
Yeah.
And it says in the Book of Mormon that I need to pray and ask.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I got to do what it says. So I did it. I had already, not realizing that I had already made the decision beforehand. So of course I'm going to make myself believe that, oh, I felt this really strong feeling,
right.
but it was just like all in my head. Yeah.
Right. And you're taught that you're more righteous if you feel that. So of course you want to, for your own, just feeling better about yourself. I'm like, yeah, I felt something.
I did. I'm pretty sure I
yeah.
felt something. Yeah. I was like, a little tingly right here. And
yeah.
You try to like make it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you would like to end with as far as like your biggest piece of advice that you would offer people that are just coming out, if you think back to yourself 4 years ago?
I'm sure there was lots of things I could, reading, I'm in a lot of great books. I think I mentioned Eckhart Tolle's book.
For me, that's been like my new scripture, because it feels like the one teaching, because I don't want to be like led astray again.
Right.
For some reason, his teachings really, it seems so
expansive.
Yeah. And it just doesn't feel like he's choosing one side.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like a new church you have to
like
sign up for.
And like, you know, like I've listened and read a lot of books, and there's people that will say you should only eat a plant-based diet, or you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I'm just like, those types of things now I'm like, I'm weary of. I just don't want to believe that there's one way.
Yeah. And I think that's why I gravitated when I read his book too. It's more of like learning how to trust yourself. Trust your instinct. And
he doesn't even claim that he has this special, like, that's what I like about him too, is he's not claiming that he has this special revelation. It's just like he's speaking what's coming to him. But he doesn't make himself seem better than anybody else, you know?
I think the other thing I would say too is it's a lonely process leaving the church, as we've mentioned, and making some good friends. So I was lucky in New Zealand to be able to make some really good friends, and we go on hikes together. They were never members of the church, but we could still talk. I mean, they were quite interested in my story, and like, just learning about different things. They're like, no, you did what?
Yeah, I know.
So it's really therapeutic to be able to talk through a lot of that stuff with them. So yeah, and that was super helpful to me. I do have to give a shout out to my boyfriend, John. You're amazing, John. I love you. But he was just so supportive through the whole thing. And just finding someone that holds no judgment for you, whether it's friends or a partner or whoever. But like, even when I met him and I was still in the church, he never once said anything negative about it. And when I was questioning the church, he was like, wow, this is a really big decision for you. Like, that must be hard. But never once was he like, yeah, I've always thought that sounded a little crazy. But I mean, we have our jokes and stuff, but
which I think can help you stay grounded, because sometimes being around other post-Mormons, it can fuel your anger and feel more like a victim instead of like feeling triumphant, like you really conquered something cool in your life.
So I think surrounding yourself with people that are just supportive, and being intentional about the people that you have in your life, and like kind of the energy they're bringing to you is really important. Especially when you're going through like really hard times. And I think that's also when you see like who your real friends are. But when you get off the phone with a friend and you feel better or worse, I mean, there's your indication, like, do I want this person in my life? So
that's awesome. I like that. Well, and it sounds like you've been blessed with a great companion, because you left the church. Like, you have a boyfriend, and it sounds like you guys have a great relationship.
So amazing. He's so good. And it's so amazing to have like an authentic, purposeful relationship, because I feel like, and not to, my marriage, but I take as much responsibility for things that have gone wrong. But I would say so much of it could have been prevented, but we were young, we were 19. We were in a system or the culture that said, get married young, have babies, you know, like it doesn't matter what you really have in common as long as you're both in the gospel. And, you know, and I mean, some people luck out and it works, like you and Sean, but we just didn't have, you know, the commonalities. And so to now be in a relationship that I am with my partner, John, and we've been together for 3 years now. It's just so refreshing to have like, we chose each other because not because of a religion or because of anything else, but so it's good.
I love that. So life is still amazing outside of the church is what you're saying.
Okay. So many good things.
Do you guys like how we kind of matched?
It's
like good. And
I showed up at Crystal's house and she's like, oh, chair, similar shirts.
But thank you guys so much for watching. And if you're just catching this now, you can go watch the replay. I'm going to go upload it to the Mormon Enlightenment YouTube channel. And thank you so much for being here. That was fun.
Thanks for having me.